Hey folks, welcome back to Abundant Life Homestead. In a recent video, we took my 1947 Farmall A out to do some work. Put the plow in the ground, we got about 80 feet and the tractor died. Now off the top of my head, I don't remember how many times I showed it dying in that video, but I'll tell you, once it died, it wouldn't stay running. 30 seconds to a minute, I couldn't put it in gear, take off. It took me forever to get it back up here to the garage or to the carport. So after that day, I took and checked all my wires, made sure everything was tight. Thought maybe I had a loose wire. A couple days later, I took it back out, did some work, pulling some trailers around. Thought that we'd fixed the condition. It must have been a loose wire. Until that same day, the tractor died again. Went into the same condition. Once it died that first time, it wouldn't stay running. I tell you what, I can't have this right now. We are getting way too close to the 2025 Portland, Indiana Tractor and Engine Show for me to be having these problems. I can get it to the show, but I'm not going to be able to do any road drives if I can't trust it. So right now, the only things I can really tell you about the problem is it'll run fine. It'll idle fine for a good long while even. You start to try to make it work, or you let it idle for, an hour and a half or so. It dies. The first time it dies, it won't stay running again. The only other symptom that we find for sure, the only obvious thing, is that when it goes into this condition, the coil becomes too hot to touch. Now, common sense might say, hey, that means the coil's bad. Put a new coil on it, problem solved, right? Well, you know me, I'm not a person to throw parts at a problem, hope I get lucky, hope I solve the issue. That hot coil may just be a symptom of something else. So what my plan today is to take this cold. It hasn't started in a couple days now. We're going to take it cold. We're going to run some diagnostics. We're going to do some testing on things. Then I'm going to fire it up. I'm going to try to recreate the condition. We'll do a bunch more tests, see if we can pinpoint where the actual problem is. And then hopefully I've got it fixed in time that I can trust it enough to take it on some road drives during the shows this year. And if not, well, maybe I'll pick one of the other family tractors. But the first thing I'm going to do, so that you can see better, or hopefully so you can see better what we're doing in here, is I'm going to take the engine cover off. Okay, now I've got the hood out of the way. We can see a little better. We've got a little more light in here. First thing I'm going to do is disconnect all the wires going to the coil. We have the ground wire here, and these may connect differently depending on your setup, but my ground wire just has a blade connection. We've got the wire that goes to our distributor that sends our spark. Pop it off. And then to get my power wire off, I actually have to loosen the mounting bolt for the coil a little bit, just so I can get in there a little easier. Mine does that with a 1/2-inch wrench. I'm going to bring it out this way. And then it's got a 5/16 nut on this terminal. Okay. So now we've got everything disconnected from the coil. What we're going to do, we're going to run a very simple test on this coil. Okay, before we get up close and test the coil that's on the tractor, I think it might better serve you, the viewers, if we come here to the table and I show you what I'm doing. That way, if you can't quite see when I'm over there, you still know what's going on. What I've done, I've got a coil from a running tractor, and I've got my multimeter. And we are going to test the resistance of the primary and secondary windings within this coil. Now you can find this test all over the internet, all over YouTube. The problem I have with the way it is presented most of the time is this test is not an end-all test. It doesn't tell you everything, it will not necessarily tell you if your coil is good, but it can definitely tell you if your coil is bad. And I'll explain that just a little more when we start to put the leads on it. Let's get you up closer. Okay, hopefully you can see this. When we talk about testing the primary winding on our coil, we're testing from here, the positive end where the power comes into the coil, to here, the negative out. What we're going to do, we're going to take our multimeter I'm going to put it on ×1 ohm resistance. Now, your multimeters may be very different. You may even have digital. I kind of prefer analog, and I'm hoping you get to see the needle on this. But with this type of multimeter, anytime I go to test resistance, I have to zero it. I have to calibrate it. So I hold my two prongs together, and then I turn this dial till the needle is pointing at 0. Just a little high there. Very touchy today. Okay, from where I'm standing, that is on 0. Okay, now whatever resistance we test is going to be the actual resistance of what we are testing. Now when we go to test this primary winding, we're looking for a fairly low resistance, somewhere around 3 to 5 ohms is good. And if it's not in that range, that can tell us a lot of things. If our resistance is very high, even stays at infinitely high, then we know in this primary winding of all that copper wire, somewhere there is a break. The break is not allowing electricity to flow through. If resistance is very low, even infinitely low to no resistance, then we know that somewhere in that winding, the insulation in that magnet wire has shorted out. So instead of the current flowing up and down in the coils, the current is making a very quick path to the negative. Then we're not getting our induction field, we're not getting good spark. So resistance in the 3 to 5 ohm range doesn't necessarily say it's good, but resistance is well out of that range tells us it's definitely bad. On this particular coil, from where I'm sitting, it looks like this one's just a little over 5, kind of drops down to right at 5. Okay, I think we're all right. Now, now we want to take our meter and switch on mine to the ×1000. We're going to test the secondary winding in this. The secondary, we go from our positive here down to the inside where our wire connects to our distributor and sends the spark to the engine. This is going to have a much higher resistance. And not all coils are going to tell us the resistance, and this one does not. It's generally going to be somewhere between 10 and 50,000 ohms. Once again, if the test looks good, doesn't necessarily mean your coil is working correctly, but if we're out of that range, we know we've got a bad coil. If our resistance stays infinite, then we know something has happened with our primary coil. It's not creating an induction field in there. We should have already figured that out when we tested the primary, but we can confirm that with the secondary. If we have infinite resistance in the secondary winding, then we know something's wrong, the coil needs replaced. If we have little to no resistance in the secondary winding, same thing. That means the insulator that separates the primary and secondary coils has broke down. The two are touching. There's almost no resistance. So we're looking for somewhere between 10 and 50,000. Get down in here. What we got here? This one says about 12,000. If you want to confirm this with your secondary, you can also do it from the negative, and you should get the same number. Yep, right there, about 12,000. So that's what I'm going to do when I'm testing the coil on the tractor. Now let's go do it. Check and make sure that our 0 is good, especially, no it's not. You always want to check every time you've made any kind of adjustment. Bring that back to where it appears to be 0 from where I'm standing. Alright, that's good. So let's look at this primary winding first. I'm going to go here on the positive, here on the negative, and we are about 4.5 ohms, right where we should be. Okay, so I put the positive, I put, well, we look good at about 11,000 ohms, but I thought I felt And I certainly did. The terminal inside of here is moving. And it has a little bit of a wiggle to it in there. Now, that could mean that there's physical damage in there. That could mean that that screw that holds that in has just come loose. It is something that can and should be addressed immediately. But for purposes of what I'm doing here, I'm wanting to diagnose everything cold. I'm going to make note of that, and after I recreate the condition, after it stops working, that will be the first thing that I address, the first thing that I fix. But that terminal in there, that cup in there, that being loose, that could absolutely 100% be the reason that this coil is getting hot. Okay, even though we identified that, let's continue on looking at what else could be the problem. Next thing I want to do is I want to test resistance through the primary to the plate inside the distributor. We pop this distributor cap off. We take our rotor off, pull our dust cover off. And the plate in the back of the distributor, this metal plate in here, is ultimately the path to ground through that primary coil. It goes into this wire here. We're going to reconnect that. I want to check the resistance between this and that coil and that plate while my points are closed. Now let's see how close or how well this shows on here. I may be able to magnify it a little bit. We don't want to just look at our points here and see that there's no gap. We want to come down here, we want to look at this shaft. It's a square shaft, has a rubbing block here that lifts our points to separate them. We want to make sure that square is not touching that rubbing block. And on here and now, it just barely is. So I'm going to take my hand crank, I'm going to turn the engine a little bit, just a little bit, to get that shaft away from that rubbing block. That's good. I don't know about the camera, but at least from where I'm standing, I can see the gap between the rubbing block and the shaft. I know my points are completely closed. So now I go back to my multimeter. And when we test this, we know we had around 4.5 ohms in that primary coil. If we test this and we get a whole lot more than that 4.5 ohms, then we know we have a problem in this wire or in this stud, even maybe in our condenser or in our points. So let's test that real quick and see what the meter says. On the positive here, on that back plate, yep, getting about 6 ohms. Bounces a little bit as I move, trying to make better connection, and the coil is moving too much. All right, try that again. Just touch the back inside of there, and we're getting 6 or 7 ohms. Bounces a little bit as I wiggle and move while I talk. So that at least tells us there's no short circuit in the primary winding's path to ground through our points. But now we're going to do the opposite of that, and I'm going to try to turn this and open the points. I'm going to open the points and check the same thing. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go to the positive side of the primary winding here, and I'm going to go to this back plate, and my meter should show infinite. Yep. Shows infinite resistance because there is no connection now. My points have separated. If it shows anything less than infinite resistance, or if it immediately goes back to that about 7 or 8 ohms that we have when the points are closed, then that tells you you've either got a problem here in your upper points, or you've got a problem here and your condenser is shorted and going to ground. At least with this test, it doesn't seem like we're having that issue. All right, the next thing I want to do is test the voltage coming in through our ignition switch. I want to make sure our coil is getting full voltage. What I'm going to do for that is I'm going to turn my multimeter to DC volts. I'm going to put it on 50 because I know we should have at least 12. Let me untie my cables here. I'm going to take this power wire, I'm going to clip it. And clip it to the positive terminal. Then I'm going to take the negative wire and I'm going to put it to ground. Oh, I'm going to turn the ignition switch on. Well, actually it's not such a bad thing to test it to ground. That's probably not the best ground to test it to, but test it to ground with the ignition switch off. If you get any kind of movement in the meter, then you've got a short in your switch. We're going to turn the ignition switch on, and we're looking at the second line of DC voltage. As we turn to 50, we should be getting right at 12 volts, and we are getting 12 volts. So we're definitely getting 12 volts to the coil. Okay. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to test the current draw on this coil. In order to do that, I've got to close my points again. Alright, so here, this is where we're going to take our positive, we're going to put it in the DC 10 amps. We're going to turn our multimeter to the DC 10 amp. We still have the red connected to the wire input. I've got my points closed. Now if I take my black lead and I put it on the input, and actually, you know what? I don't always trust electricity that should be safe even. These gloves won't offer the greatest protection, but they'll offer a little insulation in case a jolt comes through there. Okay. So I put the black lead. Oh, we're actually touching the engine block down there. We don't want that. Okay, now it's swinging free. I'm going to take the black lead, I'm going to touch it to here. We should get somewhere, like I said, somewhere 1.7 to 2.6 amps. We're right at about 2.5. That's interesting. I really thought we would be closer. I really thought we'd be closer to the 1.7, but I may have not had a good connection when I was testing the resistance down there. So next thing I want to do is test the spark. We're going to fire it up. We're going to warm it up on all 4 cylinders. I'll shut it down. I'll pull one wire, pull a spark plug. We'll let it run, and we'll try to hold that spark plug to a ground. We're going to look for a bright blue spark. I'm kind of expecting a yellow or an orange spark, seeing what we saw in this terminal. But again, I want to recreate what's going on here. So let's do that. I'll warm it up. We'll come back. We'll check the spark on the block, or at least on this. Now while we're waiting for this, a little bit of time of running. There's already some heat to that coil, and there's always going to be a little heat, but it should never be so hot that we can't touch it. Alright, got the electric off. Let's go ahead and pull. Let's go ahead and pull one of these. Let's pull number 3. Oh, by the way, with this spark plug wrench, I don't know if I've ever mentioned it before, If you own one of these tractors, you might find that there is very tight clearance to get your spark plugs out. A regular spark plug wrench size of 7/8 will often not get in there. See a lot of people milling them down, different things, buying low clearance spark plug wrenches. What I did, I just went out and got a 7/8 12-point socket. It's a pretty thin wall, fits right in there, not a problem. Keep that in mind if you ever find yourself in a position where you need a different wrench. You don't have to go buy the low clearance wrench. Just buy a 12-point. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to fire this up on 3 cylinders. Remember, I got this number 3 spark plug right here. I'm going to hold it up close to this bolt, and we're going to check and see what kind of spark we're getting. I'm fully expecting a cold or a yellowish orange spark to come out of this. But let's see what happens. Spark at all. That's a nice one. Okay, hopefully the camera picked that up. I only want to do that for a minute. That was not what I had expected at all. That was a bright and very long spark. If you get into electrical theory and this and that, you know, we got to about right here and it was jumping that gap, throwing that spark. The longer a gap that thing can jump, the higher the voltage this coil is putting out. This tells me at the very least, while it's cold, this coil is working great. But now comes the real test. I'm going to fire this up. Well, I'm going to put it back together, then I'm going to fire it up. I'm going to try to get it back into the same condition that has so far been repeatable. Where the tractor dies, where the tractor won't stay running, where this coil gets super hot. And once I do that, we're going to take all these measurements again and see if anything changed. See if anything separated when it got hot or this or that. But that's where we're going to go from here. Alright, I got called away last night. I didn't make it back to the tractor, but that's okay. Let's pick up where we left off. I'm going to fire it up. Yeah, the terrible thing is, despite its problems, it sounds beautiful, it runs great, until the moment it doesn't. So to kind of reiterate what I'm going to do here, I'm going to run this tractor until we get back to the condition to where it dies and it won't stay running. That may take me a little while, so we'll pause the camera, we'll come back after that. Alright, it's got to where it started dying on me now. It won't stay running. So far, that coil is pretty hot, but it's not so hot I couldn't touch it. Throughout all this, I've had it at times where I couldn't actually put my fingers on it. Now I definitely can't. Let's flip the switches off real quick. I think the first thing I want to test real quick is see if we're still getting a full 12 volts coming into the switch. I want to do that just to rule out maybe my switch having issues. Alright, DC. Like I said, I'll just do this stuff and tell you what's reading on the multimeter this go round. Switch off, I have nothing. Switch on. Yeah, I've got 12 good volts, about 12.4 or so. Okay, so we're going to pop the distributor cap off and see where my points are. Points are completely closed. So with that, we should be able to check the current that's drawn on the primary of this coil. Switch to my 10 amp DC setting. Put one on the incoming wire, one on the primary. With the switch off, I have nothing. With the switch on, right where we were when it was cold, about 12 or 2.8 or so in amps. I think we had said 2.6 the last time. About 2.8. Okay. Switch off. Let's go back. Let's go back to resistance. Now with the voltage being the same and the amp draw being the same, we shouldn't need to check resistance of the primary, but I do want to check just to look at what the resistance between the primary and the back plate of the distributor is, see if that's changed any. Get that wire out of here. Yeah, right about the same, right, just a hair over 6, and we had said 7 earlier. Okay, so let me grab my crank and move to where the points are open. Should be real close to there. Make sure we're not shorting out against the, make sure our points or our condenser aren't shorting out. We'll go back, check the same. We should have infinitely high resistance on the back plate of that distributor like we tested earlier, and we do. And I should still show, yeah, to the top part of my points, just a hair over 6. Actually even less, it's showing 5. So that actually tells me I probably got a little more resistance in the points themselves. The points are probably filthy. As I'm working my way through all this, you know, wondering what's going on, what we're hearing, what we're finding, I'm kind of getting the idea, especially since the coil is testing the same even when it's hot. I'm kind of starting to get the idea that we may have a bad condenser. And unfortunately, there's no good way to test a condenser. I'm going to check this secondary coil while this is hot, see if it's the same. Yeah, we're looking right at 12. Right at 12. We said 11 earlier. At least from where I'm standing in this moment, it looks like 12,000 ohms on the secondary. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking with the coil testing the same even when it's hot, I'm thinking we may have either just our points are just fouled up and we have bad points, or our condenser is going bad. Unfortunately, we can't really test the condenser. There's no good way to test a condenser. We can kind of look and see what it's doing by what it's doing to the points, and we'll get to that here in just a second. But I think before I make any changes, I'm going to put it back together, fire it up till it dies one more time. Then as soon as it stops, I'm going to pull a spark plug. We'll see if at that point, if we're still getting that good hot white spark we were getting before. And if we are, or if we're not, that's the point where we'll start making some changes again. You know, you look up this condition with a tractor online. You know, I know I'm not the first person that's ever run across this, and you find that we tend to start pulling our hair out. This kind of problem leaves us pulling our hair out because we can't. It's so hard to pinpoint exactly what's going on. And sometimes people get good answers that figures out their problem. Sometimes they don't. It kind of seems to me, for the most part, the people who start having these problems and ask about them online turn to just buying and throwing parts at it. And again, I don't like being that way. I want to see what's going on. I want to diagnose it. I want to know, at least somewhat, hopefully with certainty, know what is happening and exactly what is failing. But yes, it is quite easy to literally leave this scratching our heads, not knowing what's going on. So, I'll fire it up one more time. As soon as it dies, I'll pull that spark plug. I'll have the camera set up here. We'll see if we're still getting that nice hot spark. My coil is considerably hotter again this time than it was a little bit ago. I'm going to fire this up again on 3 cylinders. Let's check this spark. Oh yeah, still getting a beautiful blue, white, very long spark. Okay. I think what I want to do now is I want to make a couple. I do want to make a couple changes. We know that the terminal in that secondary was loose. We're going to tighten that up. I also want to open up the distributor again and take a look at those points. So let's get into those two things before we go any further. So yeah, we saw earlier, or at least I was describing it. I don't know if we could actually see it, but the terminal inside of here, that cup, was loose, wiggled a little bit. It's got a Phillips head screw that holds it down, so barring any physical damage, we may be able to tighten it up. Maybe about half turn. There's a turn. Oh, wow. Well, there's another half turn. Plus a little more. It's getting pretty tight. Not quite a quarter, but it got down there nice and tight. So it tells me it's probably not damaged. It probably just backed out. We'll see if that makes any difference here later. Now I want to tighten this back up. Straighten it out a little bit. Okay. Something else I want to do while I'm right here. I noticed when I took it off earlier, this isn't as tight as it should be. I think I'm going to take some pliers and I'm going to squeeze it down so it's tighter on that blade. Well, it didn't do me much good, did it? That will probably be too tight, but if we can force it on there, there we go, maybe. There it is. It's got a lot tighter connection on it. Down here, double check, yeah, we're good. All right, we're back inside the distributor again. Like I said, I want to take a look at my points. I've got a suspicion that my condenser is bad, and the condenser is this thing right here. And I guess the best way to explain it, when these points break open, when the points open up, it's very much the same condition as when we're holding the spark plug up against a bolt, or if you see like a power substation, when they go to shut the power off, when they go to kill the power, they separate the switch and there's that big arc that goes between the metal. As the field collapses, it tries to hold on with this big high voltage arc and pull it back together. The condenser stops that arc from happening between our points. So we can't really test the condenser itself, but we can get down in there and look at the points and see if it's what it's doing, if it's doing something to our points. And we open this up. One thing we can do, I don't know how well you can see that, but a little bit of dirt and even soot on your points is normal. But if you get much, or if you get to where one of your points starts getting a cup in it and one of it starts getting a mound on it, then you know with absolute certainty that your condenser is bad, because you're arcing in there. That bright white like ash that's in there at the moment, I'm not incredibly fond about that. And if we want to really check that, show you a little trick here. Good way to clean those and to see what it is you're dealing with. You can take a banknote, any denomination will do. Separate your points, stick them on there, pull it out. And actually, we didn't get much of anything on that. So yeah, the points are actually fairly clean. I mean, say looking at it, it looks like there's some ash on it, but there's really not. So maybe it's not. Maybe it's not the condenser going bad, or maybe the condenser's keeping that spark from happening, but when it warms up, it shorts out into here, and it's just cooling off too fast for me to tell. I'm really not certain at this moment. Next thing I do want to do, though, is check the gap in my points. And in order to do that, I need to turn this to where this shaft has my points fully open. It usually takes me a minute to get it just right, but that should be close here. Oh yeah, so there our points are fully open, because the corner of this square shaft, instead of sticking my fat finger in there, I got a laser pointer, the corner of this square shaft is pushed completely onto the rubbing block right here. So the thing we got to look at that point is what is the gap? What is the gap between our points? Now normally this is to be set at 20 thousandths, and they give you that number 20 thousandths. It's more of like an average. You'll find some tractors run better when the points are a little closer, some when they're a little further behind. You're going to be anywhere between 18 and 24 thousandths, though. That 20 is a very close, very average number. And let's pretend you don't have any, if you don't have a feeler gauge for a moment. I have some, but I left them sit in the barn. If you have something like a business card, a good thick business card, if you can slide that business card in there and maybe feel just a little resistance on each side, it should be real close to 20 thousandths. If you have something thinner that's printed on just regular cardstock, these are a little thinner than 20 thousandths. If it can go in there with no resistance, then you're really close to 20 thousandths. I'll tell you what, we're pretty much right there. Just a little resistance on the thicker card, almost no resistance on the thinner, no resistance at all on the thinner card. And if you don't have a business card in your pocket, there's plenty of other things that are very close to that 20 thousandths. Like I've got got a box from some spark plugs here. The carton that those spark plugs are come in, and the backing carton, it's in pretty much anything that you get delivered. If it's like a heavy cardstock, 9 times out of 10 that is going to be very, very so close to 20 thousandths that you're within. Stick it in there. I can feel both points with no pressure on them. So heck, and I kind of knew my points were correctly gapped anyway, because I keep up on that. So that kind of leaves me a little dumbfounded. The only thing up to this point, with everything we've done, the only thing I found wrong was that terminal on the secondary winding of the coil being loose. And I really don't see that causing this problem to the extent that of the problem we're having. I could be very wrong though. So now that we've tightened that up, and that's really the only thing I've found and the only thing I've changed, I'm going to let this cool down for a while more. It's about time for me to make Grandma lunch. I'm going to let this cool down for an hour or more, and then I'll come back and fire it back up and see if making that one simple change, that finding that loose and tightening it was everything, if that was the entirety of our problem or not. Or we could be looking into a very different direction. Don't know yet, my friends. I do not know. Again, kind of a head scratcher.